Annabelle Ryan, interview 1. How long have you been a housekeeper at Sackville Manor?
Since my mother got too old to do it, I took over from her and she took over from her mother. We've been looking after the Gilts for generations.
And you agreed to stay when the Armstrongs purchased?
Where else was I going to go?
You served breakfast to Lily and her sister the day Lily died. Did you hear of any of their conversation?
Of course. I overhear lots of things in the house. People treat you like you're invisible when you're just the hired help.
Did you hear Sophie ask Lily for a loan?
Indeed I did. Couldn't help it. Miss Taylor was crying and pouting like a spoilt brat and said Miss Armstrong was being mean not giving her any money. Miss Armstrong said it wasn't her fault Mr. Taylor was a thief and that she should probably try to solve her own problems for a change. Miss Taylor said she didn't believe Miss Armstrong didn't have any money.
Lily called Thomas a thief. Do you know what she meant?
Miss Taylor said she needed money to pay back Mr. Taylor's work. He'd been caught skimming money from his sales and was on suspension while they investigated. Miss Taylor said they'd find evidence and he'd be fired. But if they paid the money back, maybe Mr. Taylor wouldn't go to jail.
Do you know how much money Sophie asked for?
$50,000?
I see. Did you overhear anything else that day that might be important?
I overheard Miss Miss Armstrong give young Matthew a serve about being clumsy and damaging the house. She said she'd noticed holes all over the place and he was supposed to be fixing things, not breaking them. Told him she'd fire him if he kept on happening. He was right annoyed and stormed out. Serves him right. Young upstart.
You did like Matthew?
Not much. He seems to think I work for him, telling me to pick up things after him and such. I've had a bad feeling about him ever since he blew into town.
He's not a local then?
No, he's not.
What about Mrs. Armstrong? Did you get on well with her?
I didn't care for her, but I respected her as my employer.
Why didn't you like her?
Nothing personal. I just didn't care for this house to be owned by anyone but a Sackville.
But the loss of Sackville land have passed and there was no one to leave it to. That's not Lily's fault.
Be that as it may.
You served lunch that day too. Did you hear any of that conversation?
Of course. They were discussing the sale of the house mostly. Miss Taylor was pushing Miss Armstrong to sell. No doubt she thought she might get a loan after all. Miss Fletcher wasn't keen though. She said the property was important for the heir and should be left standing. I agree with her.
And Nicole?
Oh, her, Miss Webb, was most against it. Who cares about what she wants though? Nothing better than a gutter snipe. Shat's all hoity-toity, but I know better. Nasty piece of work, that one. I used to see her sneaking around with Mr. Armstrong. Like I said, they treat you like you're invisible.
Sneaking around with Mr. Armstrong?
Yeah, having an affair they were. Almost the whole time the Armstrongs lived here. Miss Armstrong was mad when she found out, but not as mad as Miss Webb when she got dumped. She was in a right fury. I don't know if her husband knows. He's not here much, always abroad on business. Probably why she got her dirty hooks into young Matthew now.
Nicole is having an affair with Matthew.
Sure is. I see him sneak off over the fence to her house on his lunch break. And not just then either. Sometimes when he's supposed to be working too. Or they'll be, somewhere in the garden, whispering. He's a lazy little devil, that one. Mr. Armstrong should fire him. Then what would Miss Webb do? Come to think of it, maybe that's what she was yelling at Miss Armstrong about in the study that afternoon.
Nicole was yelling at Lily.
Yeah, I couldn't hear what they were saying, but Miss Webb was raising her voice to Miss Armstrong over something. Then she stormed out. I went in to ask Miss Armstrong if she was okay. She said she was, but she looked mighty angry.
What time was that?
It was 5. The clock was chiming the hour as I walked in the room.
Did you see anyone in the gazebo that day?
Only the real estate fella, when I went to give a message from Miss Armstrong.
You mean David Anders?
Yes, that's him.
What was the message?
I passed on the message that Miss Armstrong would meet him in the house at 3:30 and she'd take him for a tour inside.
Had you met David before that day?
No.
That's strange. I have a witness who says you met with him in town that morning, in a coffee shop.
Well, your witness was mistaken. I did meet a friend in Coffee for Town, but it wasn't Mr. Anders.
Did you happen to see the letter opener in the gazebo?
Yes, I did. It was on the seat.
Did you see anything suspicious or interesting that you might help with the case?
Yes, actually. When I was preparing dinner, I happened to look out the window and saw Mr. Taylor go into the pool house. He was followed close behind by Mrs. Taylor.
They both went inside the pool house. What time was that?
I'd say it must have been around 6:30.
Did you see them come out?
No, one of my pots started boiling over and I had to attend to it. Then I was running late, so no more time for staring out the window, and I had to get drinks ready for the guests.
Do you remember what order the guests arrived?
Miss Fletcher was first, then Miss Webb and Matthew just after. Then Miss Taylor rushed in like she'd been chased by the devil, and Mr. Taylor came in a while later.
Is there anything else that might be important?
I think that's all.
Thank you, you've been very helpful.